All right, moving on to Isaiah 14. 14 is a continuation of Isaiah 13. It is one literary unit. If you have not listened to the previous one, please do so before you listen to this one. Isaiah 14, 1 and 2. Make sure you have that chiastic structure at hand, by the way. It's the outline that I gave you for 13 through 14. It is going to be important, and you'll see why. Chapter 14, verse 1. For the Lord will have compassion on Jacob and will again choose Israel and will set them in their own land, and sojourners will join them and will attach themselves to the house of Jacob. And the peoples will take them and bring them to their place, and the house of Israel will possess them in the Lord's land as male and female slaves. They will take captive those who were their captors and rule over those who oppressed them. Pause. If you look at the chiastic structure, we see that section C is in the center of the structure, and whenever in chiastic structure, if you see the center part is oftentimes where the emphasis lies, okay? Not that other parts are unimportant, but the peak of the structure receives a special attention because of the structure, the nature of itself. Okay, and we as we read, we suddenly are talking about, for the Lord will have compassion on Jacob, Israel, right? So in the middle of this oracle on Babylon, we are talking about Israel. Okay, and the point is that the Lord, the Lord's people are secure in the midst of all this judgment. What I mean by this, in chapter 13, 2 through 5, we saw that there is a power that gathers the nations. That power is God, right? He's going to gather nations to destroy Babylon. In 13, 17 through 19, we said that there's a power that ends empires, right? There's a power that's going to end Babylon. We will see in 14:5 that there's a power that breaks kings. 14:24, there's a power that breaks or ends each empires. So there is power in each of the sections. There's power that gathers these nations to attack a different nation and destroy them. But there is also power that is behind the Lord's people that will protect them and restore them. That same power that destroys the nations will be compassionate to Israel. So much so that aliens will join Israel. Aliens, I mean Gentiles. Okay? Gentiles will cooperate in the Lord's purpose. And the captor/captive relationship, the roles will be reversed. Okay? This is quite an important passage to think about, because we need to think about the fulfillment. All right? 14:1 through 2, we as I said, there's this, God's going to choose them again. Gentiles are going to attach themselves to the house of Jacob, and they're going to regain the land, and they're going to enslave those who enslaved them. So when was this fulfilled? First possibility is that it was fulfilled at the return from the Babylonian exile. Under Zerubbabel, Ezra, and Nehemiah, there were some Jews that returned to the land of Judah under the permission of Persia. However, that is not the fulfillment, because there was no influx of converts or a reversal of the captive/captor role. Israelites, the Judeans, Jews, were still under the yoke of Persia, and then the Greeks, and then the Romans. They didn't become captors. Wait, captors, captive. They were not under them. They were under them. They were slaves. They didn't gain independence, truly. Only briefly during the Hasmoneans, but that came to a quick end. So this reversal of captive-captor did not occur at the Babylonian exile. That's my point. So when was this fulfilled? When was or will God choose Israel again, set them in their own land where the Gentiles will join themselves to them, and so on and on and on? Another option is that the church fulfills this prophecy. Many scholars claim that at the first coming of Jesus, this Isaiah 14:1 through 2 was fulfilled. This makes me feel uncomfortable. And I ask myself, why do I feel uncomfortable when I hear that interpretation that church fulfilled this prophecy with the first coming of Christ? Well, then I look back at the text. And what does the text say? God will again choose Israel. Israel will be back in the land. Gentiles will bring the Israelites back to their land. Israel will possess them as slaves. And who's them? The captives, right? They will take captive those who are their captors. And Israel rule over them who oppressed them. So if this prophecy was fulfilled by the church, it means, if I restate the text with that interpretation, it's saying that church will be back in the land. Gentiles will bring the church back to their land. Church will possess them as slaves. Church will take captive those who are their captors. Okay, that's what it comes down to. If you believe that this text was fulfilled in the first coming of Christ, that church is Jacob and Israel, that's what you're saying. However, I do not see that it's not an impossible interpretation, okay? What I mean by that is God will again choose it. God will be back, church will be back in the land. Like believers will be back under the dominion of God. You know, like figuratively, Israel in the land under the control of God, in the kingdom of God, sort of. Israel will possess them, like the demons and the Satan and all those, evil spirits that oppress them, they will oppress them back. So like you can kind of spiritualize it and allegorize it. It's not impossible, but I find it a little difficult, to be honest. Israel, is that what Isaiah intended to say? And where is the trigger? What is the reason that I should take this spiritually? What is the reason that this should not be taken literally? Okay, I admit that this didn't happen in the Babylonian exile, and it has not happened any time in history. But I do not see any reason why this fulfillment does not lie in the future. Okay, the so-called replacement theologians, people who believe that this was fulfilled by the church, by Christians, by believers in God, whether Jews or Gentiles, try to make a lot of prophecies in the Old Testament fulfilled in the first coming of Christ. But I think if there are prophecies in the Old Testament that had not been fulfilled yet, there is no reason for us to force it upon the fulfillment with the first coming of Christ, but we can wait. There's still a long future waiting out there. The New Testament attests to the tribulation and so on, and this probably will be fulfilled with the second coming of Christ. Okay, so the third way of understanding this, the first one was that it happened in the Babylonian exile, and I told you why it's not correct. The second way of understanding the fulfillment of these two verses is that it was fulfilled by the church. Many people hold this view, and I respect them as fellow brothers and sisters in Christ, but I believe that is not what Isaiah is saying, and I believe the third way is the correct way to understand it. This will be fulfilled in the future with the return of Christ, or near, plus minus, around the time of the eschatological end when Jesus will return. Okay, that's how I view this. So the point here in that sense is that Israel's security and future after this judgment is in the hands of God. And this will be more expanded in Isaiah chapters 40 through 66. Okay, Isaiah 40 through 66 is precisely, mainly, about this restoration of Jacob, how that will come, in what manner, what will happen, what will be, what the aftermath will be, and so on. Okay, that was 14:1 and 2. Brief note on verse 1. Some of you might ask, what does it mean that God will again choose Israel? Right? Will again choose Israel. I understand this in light of the Exodus, where Israel will experience second/third Exodus and then will be chosen by God, like at Sinai. We saw how this Exodus motif repeatedly appeared so far, and it's kind of like that, where God will once again deliver Israel out of the misery. And in that sense, God will again choose Israel. Moving on to verse 3 and on, and if you look at the chiastic structure, we are moving back to B prime. Okay, so we covered section C, and we're moving back to B prime, the overthrow of the Babylonian king. Verse 3. When the Lord has given you rest from your pain and turmoil and the hard service with which you were made to serve, you will take up this taunt against the king of Babylon. How the oppressor has ceased, the insolent fury ceased. The Lord has broken the staff of the wicked, the scepter of the rulers, that struck the peoples in wrath with unceasing blows, that ruled the nations in anger with unrelenting persecution. The whole earth is at rest and quiet. They break forth into singing. The cypresses rejoice at you, the cedars of Lebanon, saying, since you were laid low, no woodcutter comes up against us. Sheol beneath is stirred up to meet you when you come. It rouses the shades to greet you, all who are leaders of the earth. It raises from their thrones all who are kings of the nations. All of them will answer and say to you, you too have become as weak as we. You have become like us. Your pomp is brought down to Sheol, the sound of your harps. Maggots are laid as a bed beneath you, and worms are your covers. Kind of gross imagery, but so the king, whoever this king may be, is gonna be brought down low so badly that people at Sheol, the underworld, are gonna say, hey, welcome, you're just like us now. You used to be that great king of Babylon. Hey, join us in sleeping in the bed of maggots. One note that I would have to say here is that if you look at verse 4, you will take up this taunt against the king of Babylon. Once again, people have attempted to identify who this king would be. Who is this king of Babylon? And Sennacherib, Merodach, Baladan, Nabonidus, Belshazzar, all are possible options. But it is, I think, in my opinion, a little futile to identify which specific king Isaiah is talking about here. I don't think that was his intention. It's more about, once again, conveying the principles of this, and plus kings. The term king or kings can represent the kingdom nation as a whole. Okay, so don't be too obsessed with trying to identify which king is this that heard these terrible statements from these fellow friends in Sheol. All right, verse 12. This is continuing the destruction of the king of Babylon. How you are fallen from heaven, O day star, son of dawn. How you are cut down to the ground, you who laid the nations low. You said in your heart, I will ascend to heaven above the stars of God. I will set my throne on high. I will sit on the mount of assembly in the far reaches of the north. I will ascend above the heights of the clouds. I will make myself like the Most High. But you are brought down to Sheol, to the far reaches of the pit. Those who see you will stare at you and ponder over you. Is this the man who made the earth tremble, who shook kingdoms, who made the world like a desert, and overthrew its cities, who did not let his prisoners go home? All the kings of the nations lie in glory, each in his tomb. But you are cast out, away from your grave, like a loathed branch, clothed with the slain, those pierced by the sword, who go down to the stones of the pit, like a dead body trampled underfoot. You will not join with them in burial, because you have destroyed your land. You have slain your people. May the offspring of evildoers nevermore be named. Prepare slaughter for his sons because of the guilt of their fathers, lest they rise and possess the earth and fill the face of the world with cities. Two more verses. I will rise up against them, declares the Lord of hosts, and I will cut off from Babylon name and remnant, descendants and posterity, declares the Lord. And I will make it a possession of the hedgehog and pools of water, and I will sweep it with the broom of destruction, declares the Lord of hosts. That was a rather long section, but that's okay. The first question you probably have in this section that we just read is verse 12 and its nearby verses. O day star, son of dawn. If you don't have a question, and I wish I could move on, but I just have to say something, even though I'm not too excited about this, but because so many people will have a question about this. 14:12, 14:15 have been often understood as the fall of Satan. How you are fallen from heaven, O day star, son of dawn. Okay? Lucifer means day star. Okay? And we have day star here in this text. So this is a figurative way of saying the son of how Satan has fallen, Lucifer has fallen. Lucifer is one of the three major angels, says the tradition. Michael being the minister of defense, and Gabriel being the minister of like the telecommunication, like messenger of God, and Lucifer being the worship leader that praises God. And he got one day full of himself, saying, I will make myself like the Most High, in verse 14. And that caused him to be cast out of the heaven and be a fallen angel. And just as much as you have a question about this, is this about the fall of Satan? Let me ask you back. Is this about the fall of Satan? You tell me. You tell me based on what you have learned from me, I hope. How do you interpret this text? Should it be? Is it about the fall of Satan, or is it not? I kind of am tempted to leave you unanswered, but I feel like many people will come at me if I do so. I will just briefly share my personal opinion, which may or may not be correct. Many people think this is about the fall of Satan. Many as in many evangelicals. And many people, also many evangelicals, or more liberals, do not see this about Satan, but about the fall of the Babylonian king. I think maybe the Babylonian king fell in a similar way that Satan fell, like being prideful. Or he may have been under the influence of Satan, who fell in this way and kind of made this guy under his influence fall the same way. It's difficult because in Revelation we get Babylon as an eschatological figure and probably the Antichrist. So, but at the same time, Isaiah had something for his for his contemporary readers. So long story short, I don't know. I think it can be both, because as I started covering from chapter 13, there are some eschatological elements embedded throughout the text on the oracle of Babylon, and this will be important later on. Okay, this chapter will be alluded to later in later parts of Isaiah. So, in that sense, it leaves the door open to understand this passage as some eschatological figure. Although I don't think Isaiah had understood it. He may have written this without that in mind, because God had that in mind. Remember, prophets write things that they don't understand sometimes. In book of Daniel, we end the book with Daniel saying, hey, you showed me all this vision, I really don't understand, right? Daniel confesses it himself, and the angel says, don't worry about it, seal it, it's not for now, it's for later anyway. So prophets didn't understand everything of the ins and outs of all these prophecies, oracles that they wrote. And I think Isaiah didn't know that this could be applied to Satan. I think he did have the king of Babylon in mind, although it could also be about an eschatological or satanic figure, now that we have the book of Revelation and the whole canon in hand. All right, let's move on. The last section is very, very, very important. This is the last overthrow of Assyria and the confirmation of judgment. This is the last section on the oracle of Babylon. Verse 24, let's do this quick. It's getting long. The Lord of hosts has sworn, as I have planned, so shall it be. And as I have purposed, so shall it stand. That I will break the Assyrian in my land, and on my mountains trample him underfoot. And his yoke shall depart from them, and his burden from their shoulder. Pause. Note that verse 25, that I will break the Assyrian in my land, does not have the word oracle. Okay, verse 24 to 25 does not have the word oracle. Masa is omitted. Once again, the word masa is supposed to be a good signal, a marker for breaking up the sections. And Assyria does not have that masa, here. Meaning this section that even though it's about Assyria, it's supposed to be understood in light or in connection with the oracle on Babylon. So then the question is, so what is the connection? Let's read on. 26. This is the purpose that is purposed concerning the whole earth, and this is the hand that is stretched out over all the nations. For the Lord of hosts has purposed, and who will annul it? His hand is stretched out, who will turn its back? As I wrote in my chiastic structure, overthrow of Assyria and the confirmation of judgment. There's this sense of confirmation of this purpose that God has purposed. It will come true. The Lord has purposed. Who will annul it? This destruction of Assyria will happen. But this is fascinating. Look at verse 25 carefully. This is one of the incidences in the prophecy where we can actually point to a specific fulfillment. That I will break the Assyrian in my land. So where is God gonna destroy Assyrians? In God's land, in the land of Israel. And on my mountains trample him underfoot. So on God's mountains, God's gonna trample Assyria under his foot. And his yoke shall depart from them. The yoke of Assyria will depart from Israel, and his burden from their shoulder. And Assyria's burden will be lifted up from the shoulders of Israel. When did this happen? We know clearly this happened in 701 BC when Sennacherib, after destroying Lachish and some other Judean cities, comes up to Jerusalem, besieges the city, and with 185,000 soldiers. This is a big amount of soldiers. He besieges Jerusalem. This is in Isaiah 36 and 37, and also in 2 Kings. And historically attested, and somewhat. And God sends angels and slays the soldiers overnight, all of them, or close to all of them, so much that they just run away. They just completely run away because the angel of the Lord came and slew them overnight. They lifted up the siege and they ran away to their home country. This is exactly what is written in verse 25, because he will break the Assyrians in my land. Assyrians are defeated not like Carchemish or any other ancient Near Eastern cities, but in Jerusalem on God's holy mountain. So, what is the significance of this passage? Why does the oracle of Babylon end with an oracle on Assyria without the word oracle? To make sure a reader, the hearer, will read this oracle on Assyria in light, in conjunction with the oracle on Babylon. Here's the answer. The end of the Assyrian power. Okay, the end of the Assyrian power that is covered just now. It's supposed to exemplify and validate the oracle concerning Babylon. Okay, the destruction of Assyria, which was the real threat to Judah in Isaiah's days. Remember, Babylon was not the threat to Judah. It was Assyria. Okay? The destruction of Assyria, the real threat to Judah in Isaiah's days, is the interim fulfillment. If God cannot demonstrate his management of history in what people see before them, why should they trust God for what they cannot see? Okay? If God cannot handle this problem of Assyria that is right before their eyes, why should they trust God for what they cannot see about Babylon and the farther future? But if they actually live through what is demonstrably a work of God, they're without excuse if they withhold belief regarding the coming days and the day of the Lord itself. Does that make sense? God is proving himself in this near future, in the present day, in Assyria, with the problems that they're having in their own time, to encourage them to trust God regarding farther future about Babylon and even the day of the Lord. This passage is awfully helpful and applicable to modern day readers like you and me. We are often at the fork of the road that has a distant and far-reaching implications. Choosing which schools to go to, which job, whom to marry, where to live, where to go for missions, and so on. Even our faith in resurrection, for example, is far and distant, and it comes with a big consequence. But how do we know it's worth placing our trust in God? And one thing we learn from this text is that we can know to trust God and that God is trustworthy when we look at our present day. What God is doing today. What God has done in the past. If we look back at those things, we oftentimes gain surety, assuredness to trust God down the road in the future. What does that mean? If you're at the fork of the road where you have to make an important decision of faith, I encourage you to look back at how God has led you thus far, to how He has led you to be where you are today. Sit down and pause and think for a minute. What is God doing right now? What God has God done in the past to help me be who I am today? Help me be where I am today. And if you think about it, you probably, and I hope you will, see that God has done many, many, many faithful, good things in your life to help you be where you are today. And that is supposed to be the ground on which we stand as we face future. Because we know what God has done so far, because we see His faithfulness that is attested in our lives, in our ups and downs, there's no reason why we should not trust God in the future as well. The commonplace way of saying this is to spend time with the Lord. Go and spend time with the Lord. But really, how do you do it? Think about, stick out your antennas, tune your radio to what God is doing today, what God is speaking to you today. Okay? That is how we are to be able to trust God in the future. So I hope if you're in that situation to spend some minutes to pause and think, what has God done so far? What is God doing today? And what does that mean regarding my decision that I have to make regarding my future? Isaiah ends this oracle on Babylon, this distant future, by closing with what God will do in the near future of Assyria, and that is supposed to help Israelites trust God. God doesn't place us in a dungeon just saying, hope you trust me, good luck. No, He wants us to trust Him, and He will help us by demonstrating His goodness to us. God bless you.